Inspired by Proverbs 27:17, this is Sharpening Kingdom Leaders with ACSI President and CEO, Dr. Larry Taylor. Hear inspiring stories from Christian school leaders from around the world and be challenged to continue running the race to advance Christ-centered education. Hi everyone, I'm Josh Warden, and this is the Sharpening Kingdom Leaders Podcast. Well, today we're continuing a series on global voices within the ACSI family. Our guest today is Julie Heinsman from Taiwan. Julie actually grew up in Taiwan, graduated from Morrison Academy, came over to Chicago and lived there for a time, and then returned to Taiwan with her husband as missionaries in 1995. She's worked back at her alma mater at Morrison Academy ever since 2000, and she currently serves as the superintendent. We think you'll really enjoy her passion for Christian education, also the challenges she's worked through, some peculiar to her area, the tensions between China and Taiwan, but also challenges that you can resonate with no matter where you're at around the globe, and also encouraged by some of the success stories and things she's passionate about as well. Before we get started in this conversation, we just want to encourage you to subscribe to this channel. If you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast app, if you would subscribe, maybe share with another school leader so that as many people as possible can be encouraged by this podcast channel. All right, here is Julie Heinsman on the Sharpening Kingdom Leaders Podcast.
Well, Julie, such a great opportunity to hear you this morning give testimony to our attendees here in beautiful Dubrovnik, Croatia, our International School Leaders Conference, and you're leading a school that is around the globe one of the most respected Christian international schools, I think, around. So, but please tell us a little bit about your school and how long you've been there.
Okay. Well, thanks, Larry. So I'm at Morrison Academy, which is in Taiwan, and we're celebrating 70 years. It's a big celebration this year.
Wow.
So we have about 1,000 students in 3 different cities. We have campuses in 3 different cities, and then we have a little bitty satellite school in another city. That comes about because our board has long ago said if there's missionaries in a city where there's no school, they can ask the school, can you put one here? As long as they have at least 4 students, we'll see if we can do a satellite. So the satellites come and go. Right now we have 21 kids in the small city of Chiayi. We're educating missionary kids. Our purpose statement is to educate children of missionaries in Taiwan. But we also are educating business families and children of doctors and lawyers and businessmen and women in Taiwan. So we have kind of a mixture of missionary kids and kids who are not missionary kids.
Yeah. So 70 years.
Yeah.
And how long have you been there?
I have not been there 70 years, okay?
I know that.
Well, I went to Morrison when I was in first grade.
Uh-huh.
But I've been working at Morrison since 2000.
Wow.
So.
Wow.
And I do tell a story that in 1995, the superintendent met me and said, when are you going to start working for us? And I said, never.
Never.
So now I have his job.
So
yeah.
you know, what would you consider one of your greatest opportunities? And I love the demographic you just discussed. And so when you look at that mix and your mission, what do you consider maybe the top 1 or 2 opportunities you have as a school that's 70 years old and thriving?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think it's 2-pronged what we're doing. So the first thing is just to allow missionaries to do their work. So their children can come and get a good education with us. They're not worried about education. And then the other prong is we have some children from some of the most influential families in Taiwan, and they're coming to us to get educated, and just the influence we have there. A lot of those families are not Christian families. We've got kids coming to the Lord. We have families coming to the Lord. Just have that kind of that influence with Taiwanese people. Now, all of our students have to have a passport from somewhere else, but these are all families that American Taiwanese, New Zealand Taiwanese, Australian Taiwanese, and so just like a two-pronged approach at how we're spreading the gospel and sharing Christ.
You know, I've had for years, it's such a burden for our Christian schools, wherever they are, to be unapologetically committed to excellence. Mm-hmm. And excellence in everything, scholastic, arts, athletics, of course, spiritual development, and spiritual formation. And so for you to attract the clientele that you attract, I think speaks volumes of your commitment to excellence. What are your top, I know you're probably going to say everything, but what are your top 2 or 3, scholastically especially, what are your top 2 or 3 that you think are very attractive, that's pulling them in to your school academically?
Well, I think families are coming because they want college prep. So they want to be ready to go to university and ready to be accepted to universities all over the world. So we're offering a high end of just all the core subjects. I think is pretty important to us that kids are getting educated. But we've in the last few years we're really pushing to talk about what is it about learning? What does it mean to learn? And in a high pressure academic environment, especially with our Chinese families, sometimes we can veer towards memorization and grades and that kind of thing. So we have had a big push towards standards-based education and standards-based grading. We've made a full conversion to standards-based grading because we're trying to really push towards learning.
Yeah.
What are you learning? And that's a little countercultural sometimes with our students and our families because they say, just tell me what I need to know so I can get an A, so I can get into that university.
Yeah.
But we're insisting on, we want you to understand this and think deeply about these topics. Still growing in that, just trying to get better at that, the critical thinking, the deep thinking.
Yeah, I think we all are. I mean, I'm fresh out of the head of school seat and really can relate to what you're talking about and appreciate what you're talking about. And so in the area of spiritual development, understanding that you have not everyone at your school is a Christian. And so when we talk about spiritual development and spiritual formation, obviously that's different. Someone who's coming not necessarily because they want to learn about Christ or God's Word. And so how do you train your faculty and staff to remain true to your mission in that type of setting?
Yeah. So you talked about unapologetically academic and academic excellence. We have that, but we're also unapologetically Christian.
Amen.
So anybody who comes to us, whether they're Christians or not, they all know up front, it's a Christian school you're coming to. Your kids are going to have Bible class. They're going to go to chapel. And then I also say to parents, when you're in the science class, that teacher is going to be talking about their faith. And when the literature teacher's talking about something, she's going to be talking about themes of redemption and God and those kind of things. So with our teachers, we're always trying to think, okay, how do we help them with this different kinds of communities? And we actually this year have had a huge push in this area where we've done some specific training for teachers on how to have spiritual conversations with students from at any place where they're at.
Great.
And really the main core of the training was, let's slow down, let's find out what kids are really asking us, let's not give them quick answers, let's listen to what their questions really are and sit with them and let them wrestle with what their questions really are before we give them a quick answer. And it's not to say that we're changing in what our theology is. Our theology is the same.
Yeah.
We're not changing our Bible curriculum. That's still the same, very solid. But we're talking about those individual conversations that you have as a coach, as a mentor,
Right.
as a teacher, as the guy in charge of drama, those things, when the kids are asking you some of these hard questions. How do you answer those? How do you sit with a kid through those difficult conversations? And so we've had all year, we've been running these trainings all year with staff, and it's been really good. Not all easy, but generated a lot of conversation with our staff too. Just because we need them to know that you're not going to gear all your conversations for that missionary kid who has this background from going to church all their lives. You're also going to have to think about that child whose only exposure to Jesus is what they see here at our school.
Right.
And so how you have to have a couple different ways to answer some questions.
I absolutely love that that's been your focus for a year with your faculty, and it reminds me of David Kinnaman and Barna Research going back, I think, to 2012, 2013, and did published a book, You Lost Me, and it was focused on about 27 years of longitudinal research. It was studying the millennials. I know we have another generation now, but it was studying the millennials. And Kinnaman talked about the 6 disconnects with reaching the millennials. And you triggered a couple of those with what you just said. One of them was that we oversimplify difficult questions. We go straight to the Jesus answer.
Yes.
And the second one is we don't create space in the school day or the school conversation to allow doubt. So I just really appreciate the emphasis on training. I think that's wonderful. What are your greatest challenges as a leader?
Greatest challenges. Well, hiring quality teachers, and I'm just going to say this right here. I think some teachers are leaving the profession because they've lost what they came into teaching is not there anymore in their schools. And I want to say in international education, it's still there.
It's still there.
If you're a teacher and you think, oh, I can't do it anymore because what I love is gone, look internationally.
Come international.
We have parents who are committed to their kids getting educated. We have safe classrooms. You're not worrying about any gunmen coming in or any of that kind of thing. We have the freedom to speak about a variety of issues, and so I think, and we don't have a lot of discipline problems in the classroom. So I think for teachers who need a restart of their love of teaching, we're looking for those teachers.
I love that.
I think with students, the biggest questions are related around gender and attraction issues. How are we going to relate to them in those issues and those questions? And then I'm in Taiwan, so China, of course, is always a little bit of a cloud back there. We're always wondering what's going to happen next with China. So we're not worried about it. We're not fearful, but it is something that you have to always be thinking about a little bit.
Well, I was going to ask you that. I mean, it's obviously in the news. I think you guys deal with it wonderfully, but share with us how you deal with it so that it's not a fear that controls your campus.
So, the China threat has been a threat since we started as a school. I mean, that's one reason there's so many missionaries in Taiwan, because they all came from China when the communists kicked them out after the war, World War II. So a long time ago. So it comes and goes, and it comes and goes in waves of this more aggression and less aggression. Now, of course, right now we're in a period that's probably the highest aggression ever.
Yeah.
But we also know that some of that is it's a little bit of an act by China for the world to say, don't mess with us. If you do, we're going to mess with Taiwan. So we have some plans. We are always talking with the State Department. We don't have an embassy in Taiwan because we're not a nation, according to the world. So American Institute in Taiwan is there, and they're our indicator. So we are waiting for them to tell us if we need to move in some way. So we're always in contact with them. The board did a little task force to talk through various issues. And a couple years ago, when the tensions were a little higher, we did some things like every staff member has this water jug with a water purifier system. So, because we were told water could be a big problem if there was some kind of attack. So we have that system. We can purify water. We have sat phones if we need them. We have a liaison in the States that can be a contact person for families if necessary. And then we're not worrying about it all the time, but whenever there's a flare-up, I try to always communicate with staff that we're paying attention to it. We know that there's some more things happening in the news. And here's, again, remind you, here's your steps if anything were to happen. So, yeah.
I really appreciate that. I mean, I can't even imagine. So it's kind of surreal for me to even have a conversation with someone who is living it out while I'm usually in the United States watching the news. But it really blesses me because I think the students and the faculty, they take their cue from the leader and the leaders.
Right.
And so I just love, I mean, obviously you're prepared, but you're not leading out of fear. And that really spoke to me earlier today when you were sharing that.
Yeah.
What, let me ask you this, how has ACSI assisted your school over the years, and what could we do that would even assist you more?
Yeah. I've really loved in the last few years the depth of research that ACSI has been part of, and we've been reading some of the books, especially some things that Dr. Lynn Swanner has been putting out with her team, and that research has been pretty valuable to us. Flourishing Schools.
Good.
We did the Flourishing Schools instrument this year, which was a nice start for that kind of thing. So just some of those resources. There's some professional development resources for some of our teachers, certification resources that have been pretty helpful. We're continually hoping that ACSI will continue to think of ways to meet the needs internationally even more. A lot of things are pretty U.S. centric, which is right. That's where you're developing those materials. But just to be thinking, okay, how does that affect international?
Yeah.
These Flourishing Schools, little mini workshops that you're having around the U.S., I would love to take a team to one of those, but I don't really have the resources to take a total team to South Carolina or Kansas City or Chicago. Last year it was in Chicago.
Yeah.
So if ever there was one being hosted internationally, we might be able to get a team to go to one of those. I think it would be really valuable to take a team and sit and listen and then discuss and work through, whatever the topic is for that series of Flourishing Schools workshops. I'm excited about those. I just don't quite have access to them.
Well, let's do them. Let's do our first one in Taiwan.
Well, there we go. That would be awesome.
I appreciate you saying that, and I will tell you, our prayer and our goal is more intentionally today than ever before going global. Well, final question.
Okay.
So if you had to pick a highlight from this past year related to anything, related to a student, a parent, a faculty member, a situation, what would your highlight be? There's probably a bunch of them, but what would you say your highlight has been?
There has been a lot of highlights. I think I'll tell you the most recent one. I was just interviewing a woman to hire her for a position at one of our campuses, and she came in. She said, "You probably don't remember me, but you interviewed me a few years ago for admission for my children to come to school." And then when she said that, I said, "Oh yeah, I do remember you." And then she told her story about how they had come back to Taiwan. They are Taiwanese Americans. They'd been living in the U.S. They came back to Taiwan during COVID, and they weren't Christians. And somebody had said, "Why don't you go to that church over there?" And they became Christians, and their kids are at our school. She said the whole family's been baptized, and now her father, who was the reason they came back to Taiwan, to be near her elderly father, her father's going to church with them. And it's just so, now I just hired her to be a PR manager for us. That is just so exciting.
That's a great story. Wow, that blesses me.
It's pretty exciting.
That blesses me. Well, thanks for spending some time with me, but more than anything, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your faithful presence in one place for such a long time. You've done a wonderful job, and we will be praying for you, and we will seriously consider Taiwan hosting
Come on
the
over.
First Flourishing Schools Institute.
There we go.
Love it.
We'd like to thank Julie Heinsman for joining us on the podcast and for her service to Christian education as a whole. It's clear that she cares about the most important things. I mean, her story of a family being impacted by the gospel, those stories of people's hearts being changed and coming to know the Lord more, those are the most important things, and she puts that at the forefront and then sets the tone for her other faculty, the people at her school, to care about those same things as well. We hope you are encouraged by that, enjoyed this episode of the Sharpening Kingdom Leaders Podcast. We'll see you next time. For all of us at ACSI, I'm Josh Ward. Thanks for tuning in.
Sharpening Kingdom Leaders is a presentation of the Association of Christian Schools International, equipping Christian schools and educators to be stronger together. Learn more at acsi.org.